order and do a roll call to see who all is here. I have heard that Jason Beebe is not going to be able to make it. Is that correct? Jason, are you available? Janet Hutchison contacted me. She said she would not be available as well. So, Patricia Youngman, are you present?
Yep, I am.
Gail Merritt?
Here.
Teresa Rodriguez?
I'm here.
And Jeff Papke?
Here.
Turn up your speaker a little bit, Jeff. You're hard to hear, please. And then, Steve, do you want to check with staff?
Yeah, so Andy Parks, are you on the line?
I am.
Very good. James Wilson?
I am present.
Liz Schutte?
Here.
City Recorder Lisa Morgan?
I'm here.
Chief Dale Cummins? No chief. Anybody from police?
I'm here, sir. Sorry, I was muted.
No worries. Thank you, Dale. Okay, have I missed anybody? Darla, are you on? I don't think Darla was going to join us tonight. Any other staff members present with us tonight?
Hey, this is Josh. I'm here.
Thank you, Josh. Okay.
Jared Reed.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Jared. Anybody else? Okay, very good. So we have two subjects, Mayor.
Okay.
The first being the water rate study and staff report. The second being the Pacific Power franchise fee contract and potential adjustment. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, and I think Eric's ready to go.
Okay, well, I'm just going to turn it over to Eric. You want to go ahead and pursue the water issue?
Yep. So for the record, Eric Vaughn, City Engineer. So Council, tonight we're going to present information on a potential rate change to our water rates. We've really tried to be equitable, and we want to make sure everyone's paying their fair share. This will be a lot of good information for you tonight, and then if we decide we'll move forward with this, go into more detail, and then we would potentially bring this back the last meeting in June to be adopted with our new rate schedule. So with that, we're going to talk about tiered water rates today, and I thought it might be helpful for some of our new council members to kind of go over a little history of the water fund and the water department. So moving forward, city has a fairly large water system, so we have over 3,900 connections. Those are homes, commercial accounts, industrial accounts, etc. Over 70 miles of pipeline in our little town. 11 wells. All of our water currently comes from deep underground aquifers. We have 4.5 million gallons of storage, and we produce about 600 million gallons of water a year. If we look at the replacement value of our water system, it would be about $100 million, which is a significant asset to our community. And we currently provide about $800,000 a year in maintenance costs. So if we look back at the water fund a decade or so ago, in 2006, the city began tracking unaccounted for water. So this is water that comes out of our wells but doesn't make it to a customer. And at that time, we were losing over 25% of our water. So this is water that we put the energy into pulling it out of the ground. We've added some chlorination, and we're losing it to different sources. So about 171 million gallons a year of water was lost. We started working aggressively to drive this number down. We installed a lot of new meters, replaced leaking lines, and we did several projects around the town. The golf course had a big section of that. Their irrigation system connected to potable water that was unmetered. We replaced that with irrigation water. That saved about enough water to provide for 63 new homes. The police department had a thermal heating system that was designed to use groundwater, just shallow groundwater, and it was hooked to the city water system. We updated that with some ERA funds. That was enough water to provide for 45 more homes. And then bulk water fill station. In the past, we had just relied upon honesty for people buying bulk water, and we gave them cards and account numbers. James, if we could go back real quick to that last slide. So the city of Prineville, one interesting thing about the city of Prineville is that we were growing very, very quickly during World War II. Because of that and the steel shortages at that time, the city of Prineville had a lot of wooden water pipe in our system. So there, that picture there shows some of the wooden water line that we're upgrading with larger PVC line. We still have about a block of wooden water line left in town. It's in great shape, and we will eventually get that changed out. So moving forward to the next slide. This graph here shows all of the good work that we've done. So as I mentioned, we got really aggressive on leaks, on unmetered customers, on tanks overflowing. And you can see in 2006, we were producing over 600 million gallons of water a year. The next line down is that water that we're selling to our customers, and then the final line is that water that is just lost. And you can see, as we move forward through the last decade, we were actually producing significantly less water. In 2010, we got down to 500 million gallons, but we were selling significantly more. So you can see how we really drove that unaccounted for water down, which was wonderful. We were providing for significantly more customers with the same amount of water. And moving forward, James. So with all of that effort, we were able to save over 131 million gallons of water a year. So how much water is that? That's a lot of water. So if we took our high school football field, the football field's 160 feet wide by 300 feet long, that is a stack of water, a cube of water over 367 feet high. So you can see we have a little graphic there that shows our football field. We threw the Seattle
Space
Needle in there just for size. And we are currently saving that much water each and every year now. So we're very proud of that. We're being good stewards of our water. And because of that, we won an Oregon Water Resources Department award in 2017 for the best implementation of a water conservation plan.
Eric, would you say, I know we looked at some metrics in the past that compares our usage capabilities and our retention capabilities in our water system to other like-sized cities or Central Oregon cities. How do we compare on that? As I recall, we do really well.
Yeah, the Oregon Water Resources Department would like the communities to be under 15% unallocated water, 10% if you can. We've actually driven it down to less than 2%. It's currently a little higher than that. We got, I'm sure, some leaks that we can't find or some meters that are failing. But yeah, water is definitely tough to find in Prineville sometimes, and so we want to make sure we're good stewards of that. The water system has to meet very, very different demands. So if you look at the average water use in January, we're producing about 800,000 gallons. In August, as a monthly average, that jumps up to 4.2 million gallons per day. And so you can see the majority of our residential customers, they have a 4-to-1 demand. So they use 4 times more water in the summer than they do in the winter. That would be the irrigation. You know, some of our residential customers irrigate a lot, some irrigate very little. But overall, our residential customers use 4 times more water in the summer than they do in the winter. The real issue comes up with large industrial demands. And so we see demands swing up to 11 times. So if we look at their wintertime demand versus their summertime demand, we're really getting hit quite hard. And we see that industrial demand significantly increasing. The graph there shows our residential demands and what percentage that is of our total water sales, and you can see over the last decade it is starting to trend down. Moving forward. And then this graph here is simply showing our total water sales versus our residential sales. So the blue line down below is residential sales, The gray line is total sales. So let's look at 2019, which really starts to show the change in the water system. So you can see our blue residential customers, they went from, you can see that's approximately a 4 times increase from winter to summer, but then our total water use is very much spiking during the hot months of the summer. So does that make sense, Steve? Anything to add to that?
No, I think what's really showing from about 2014-15 on is that growth in the industrial side really driving the city to accommodate those peak demands by a very small percentage of our customers.
Yep, and a lot of that can be construction water,
Could be,
you know,
yeah.
so it's not all industrial customers, but just that water that's being needed during the hottest parts of the year. So then moving forward.
I have a question on that last slide. This is Patricia.
Yep.
If you could explain why 2008 has such a huge high spike compared to 2019, they're almost the same.
Yeah, and on that I'm not sure, Patricia. That could have been some large construction project going on at that time. It could have been like a large leak at that time. That's total water produced, but it definitely appears to be an anomaly to me.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing I think is helpful to think about, this is a utility. This is part of the utility package the city offers to our constituents. It's not unlike an electric utility, and for those of us who are farmers, and Gail, you'll appreciate this. So in the case of a farming scenario, the power company has to have a huge amount of power ready to go when the farmers turn their pumps on. And that power has to be available really all year long, but certainly by March, April, they have to have that system capacity ready to go at a second's notice. And that's really true with what we're doing here at the city. We know that in the hot times of the year when it's 100 degrees or 95, 100 degrees for a 2 or 3 week stretch, that our industrial customers can go up, as Eric's graph showed, the ratio of 11 to 1. And we have to be ready to meet that demand, even though that demand is only for 2-3 weeks of the year where we hit that absolute peak, or where we can hit that absolute peak day. So we have to build out a system that can manage to that, and that's what really drives our capital cost structure.
Yep.
So same thing with any utility.
And exactly what we're saying here, obviously that system has to meet that just highest single day demand. Yeah. And a lot of times we'll see that in August where maybe it's been in the 90s for a week and it jumps up to 100 degrees for a couple of days, and people just don't care anymore. They're hot, they're miserable, they're taking a bunch of showers a day, and they're irrigating their lawn just to try to cool things off. But the capacity has to be there for that worst day. Once again, our residential customers, that's a 4 to 1 demand. Some of our industrial customers, it's a 11 to 1 demand. And right inherently in those proportional demands is our issue. And so my best water customer would be a little old lady on Social Security that uses the same amount of water during the winter that she does during the summer. Because that way, that capital asset that we have to provide to her is selling the same amount of water year-round. When we see these really high peaks, we're not selling any water during the winter, but we have to have all of these capital assets available to meet that summertime peak demand. And there's a lot to that. We have to maintain those assets. We have large pumps that even if those pumps aren't using power, we still have to pay standby power to the public utilities. So inherently, that's the issue that we're faced with and how we see things changing. So moving forward. So at this stage, I'd like to turn this over to Andy Parks. Andy Parks is a financial consultant that we use. He has a lot of experience with rates and community financing and finances. And with that, Andy, could you take over and kind of explain some of the studies that we've had you look into?
Yes, sure, Eric, thank you. Yeah, pleasure to be joining you via Zoom meeting here this evening. So, going back to the 2018 rate adjustment, we went through, prior to that time, you had a system that ultimately had large meters that had discounted commodity rate, if you will. There was a large amount of water that was provided in the base rate, and ultimately there was some subsidy going on between the larger customers and the residential customers. And one of the things that was desired by the city at that time, and I think continues to this day, is to provide a more equitable rate structure, and also to not have a significant budgetary impact to individual customers, and be able to meet the needs of the city in terms of its updated capital plan. Next slide, please, James.
Really quick on that, if we could jump in, for the council members that have been on council for a bit, you'll recognize all of the efforts that we've put into equity. When I first started with the city 12, 13 years ago, we had a rather archaic system development charge methodology that tended to give incentives to larger businesses rather than to residential customers. And if you remember, we did a lot of work during the recession to update that to where it's very equitable. So I can provide water to an industrial customer or 100 homes. Industrial customer, you should pay the same rate as those 100 homes. And that's worked out very well for us. We can easily explain those charges. And at the end of the day, no one customer class is supporting another customer class. So go ahead, Andy.
You bet. So as we looked into, I think, staff, start with them, they noticed the forecast that we had put together for revenue, that at the end of fiscal year 19, it was falling a little bit short, and they went back and looked and, to see what that cause was, and they had some suspicion that it was around reduced bulk water consumption. And then a little bit later, looking into the summer and fall of 2019, see if that trend continued. They did continue to see bulk water consumption continuing to decline, and it was actually down a little over 400% over the months of July, November of 19 compared to July of November of 18. That's significant in that bulk water, at the time that we did the initial projections and the forecast and so forth, was a fairly significant portion of the city's overall water sales, and the rate for bulk water is considerably greater than the rate for other water consumption. So in that impact ultimately was causing total water revenue to decline to a point that they, staff wanted to have a look at that and see what some alternatives were to address that deficiency, because the cost of the system, the cost of maintaining, the cost of the capital replacement weren't going down. The other areas, the water consumption for the system, particularly in the area of residential and commercial and so forth, was all at or above what was projected. So the need to generate additional revenue, was paramount. So in that process, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I just want to make sure, this is fairly complicated, everybody understands. So let's talk about bulk water. What is bulk water? Bulk water is water that we sell to people essentially that aren't our customers. And so unfortunately, there's been people that maybe live up Juniper Canyon, their well has gone dry, and they have to, haul water from the city. So they may have a 500-gallon tank in the back of their pickup. that they fill up with bulk water at our fill station. So we charge significantly more for bulk water than we do for just commodity water. Commodity water would be $2 for every 750 gallons. Bulk water is more like $10 for every 750 gallons. Just because that demand comes and goes, those customers aren't paying any set rates. And where we saw the big change in bulk water comes with construction. So we were in a stage of construction where we were selling a lot of bulk water. So what was that? That was construction companies that were connecting to our fire hydrants, filling up water trucks, and using that good potable water to spray on the ground to keep dust down. And what has happened is, some of that construction has gone away. Some of those projects have developed to a stage where they're now purchasing that water no longer through a hydrant. They're purchasing it through their meter where they pay their system development charges. But we've drastically seen those sales decrease. One thing for council to know is that, once again, water is a very precious resource to us, and so we offer and we have constructed a water fill station at the freight depot where these customers, for just a fraction of the cost, can fill with irrigation water. So instead of using our potable water for dust control, they can go out there and get water for pennies on the dollar, irrigation water, and we always offer that up. Some of the construction companies, they're in such a hurry, they don't want to drive a few more miles, and so, hang the cost for just going to pour potable water on the ground. But, at the end of the day, I think, and as things change, we need to think about, is that a good use of our resource? Why not use irrigation water if you don't need that precious potable water?
One piece that I'd like to get clear, because it's a little bit gray, is the deficit that we are experiencing has to do with operations, does not have to do with systems development types of projects that drive the cost of water.
Absolutely. We make sure that, once again, my favorite water customer, the little old lady on Social Security, no part of her rate, I want no part of her monthly rate going to support the construction of a new data center. A new data center, when they come in, they have to pay their system development charges, that build the big tanks, that drill the wells, to do all of that. What we're finding right now is with all of that capital asset that we're maintaining, but we're only using for a small portion of the year, there's an inherent cost to that we're trying to understand and make more equitable.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. So, the initial discussions with staff, we talked about two different ways ultimately to, raise the desired revenue. One, retain the existing rate structure and increase rates to all customers. Pretty much, it's a well-designed rate structure. Go ahead and just, across the board type increases. The other was to, was the city wanting to consider evaluation of a tiered rate structure, which would more equitably fund those increased capital demands due to the increased usage during those high demand months that Eric and Steve have talked to, in terms of, residential being 4 times the number in the summer months, and industrial high demand users being upwards of 11 times. Next slide, please, James. So that initial analysis, indicated a rate increase ranging anywhere from 12 to 18%, and there's some flex in that just based on some assumptions to what might happen with with the rate, or with the consumption in bulk water area. And then at that time, I think pretty consistent, amongst staff that let's definitely look at the evaluation of tiered rates. I don't think anyone was wanting to move forward with that type of rate increase on your residents. So we went ahead and created a fairly sophisticated model that facilitates the analysis, to provide quick updates to, what the summary amounts would be generated on a monthly basis, as well as on an annualized basis by the various, types of water, or should say totals of water that's being sold on a given month, and all the way down to individual accounts to see, how they would be impacted on a month-to-month basis. And we're using live data from fiscal year 2018-19 through November of 2019 as well. We did initial findings for a two-tiered rate structure, and to generate the dollars that were needed in that, there was a need to raise rates on individual, or should say on all accounts base rate, as well as provide for a tiered rate that then also ended up with a rate that was upwards of 150+% of the regular base rate, which is currently $2.04. So that would make it somewhere around $3. We went beyond that and looked to a three-tiered rate structure. Next slide, please. And, in each of these evaluations, we're going from a broad range of 125% to 175%, looking at the amount, and that's on the rate side. On the consumption side, looking at whether to do as little as 3 times the winter average on up to 6 or 7 times the winter average. And we just went through that process, and ultimately what we're presenting to you this evening is where the tiered rates kick in at 500% of winter average consumption. And so remember, the 4 times is the residential. So the vast majority of residential accounts end up with no impact as a result of this type of rate structure, again, with 500% winter average as a tier 2, and that rate being 135% of the base consumption rate, or 275 a 100 cubic feet. And then we also did similar type of evaluation with, the winter average, for the third tier, anywhere from say 500-600% on up to 800-900%. And where we ended up settling in for the, for this discussion was at a rate at 750% with a rate of 175% of base. So $3.57 per 100 cubic feet. Next slide, please.
Really quick, if we could maybe jump back to that one. There's a lot of percentages there, but to just boil this down, so if you use 5 times more water in the summer than is used on an average during the winter, this would have no impact. Once you go more than that, 500%, then that additional water that you use would cost you a little bit more. It would go from $2 essentially per 750 gallons to $2.75. If you continue to use significantly more in the summer versus the winter, when you go 7.5 times more, then we would increase that from $2.04 per 750 gallons to $3.57. So, once again, I want to make sure the 500 and 750%, that is not related to a rate increase. That's the water usage and how that would work. So, it triggers. It triggers it. So once again, my perfect water customer, the little old lady on Social Security, she's using the same amount of water during the summer as she is during the winter. This would not impact her whatsoever.
Eric?
Yes.
This is Jeff. Got a quick question. Have you run this number, or have you looked at our current water users, and if we dropped this in, I know you say most customers would remain in place, but have you actually run the numbers to see who or how many people, both industrial and residential, this would affect?
Yeah, I'll let Andy take that. That's exactly what we have on the next slide.
You're jumping ahead, Jeff.
I'm always an overachiever.
You are. Well done.
Okay. Well, yeah, Jeff, thank you for that question. And what we did is, and this analysis is able to be updated with, any change to, those metrics that I mentioned earlier. And, we show the total number of accounts, the number of accounts that end up in a tier 2 situation and tier 3. And then you can see the percentages of those highlighted down in yellow below. And so the high month of customers impacted is, in August, with a little over 36%. So almost, 63.6% of customers would not be impacted by this change in the rate structure. And that's during the month with the most, that's the highest point of the 6 months this would effectively apply. The other, next highest is, 25, 26%. So 3 out of 4 aren't impacted, and then down, the 20% range for the other couple months, and then below that. So you're dealing with folks that are going to be impacted. Some will be, but the vast majority are not. And then as far as tier 3 goes, again, the high is, about 6.5% or 250 customers, and that drops off by another 100 in September, and below 100 the other months.
And we spent quite a bit of time working with the model on this. So in this scenario, Jeff, that to knock you into the tier 2, that's when you're using 500% more. We could increase that and make the penalty essentially larger, or we could decrease that and make the penalty less. But we thought that 500%, that fits really well with our average residential customer being a 4-to-1 increase. And I guess that was our thought process behind where we came up with this.
Hey, Eric, this is Josh. I got a question. Could you explain to people, basically, are you paying this on a per month? Or if you hit it, you pay it all the time? I think that's kind of the question.
No. Yeah, it's just...
People might have.
Yeah, so you can see in November, December, January, February, essentially nobody's going over this. And so, you're not going to get into that tiered rate. And once again, if you have a half-acre yard that you like to keep really, really green, then up to 500% of that average wintertime usage is going to be at the first rate. Once you go over that, it'll go to tier 2 for those additional gallons, and then if you continue to go to tier 3. With that said, if the next month it rains and your water demand drops way down, it starts completely over.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
And again, this is Steve. This is just for the excess, the water over and above that 500%.
Correct.
So you have the flat rate up to for the first.
Yeah. So historically, if we take this in a completely different direction, if we weren't looking at tiered rates, then we would increase, a smaller amount across everyone. Mm-hmm. But as we started the presentation, that's not what the problem is. The problem is these very significant high summer peak demands. And so this is just trying to make it more equitable so that we're not asking our residential customers essentially to support a large industrial user.
Okay. Does the council have any questions at this point?
Yeah, this is Teresa. I guess my question is the dollar difference. So once you hit that 500% over your winter months, what does the price difference then become? How big of a jump is that?
Well, so up to that 500%, you're going to pay the normal water rate, Teresa. So for all of that water, and Andy, I'm not sure if you have a slide, but probably off of memory I can do this. So
that's the next one.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and switch. Perfect. So Teresa, here you see that, like a home has a 3/4 inch meter. And that's once again, that's our basic building block. We want everything to equate to a home. And so a 3/4 inch meter, those customers use about 5 units of water during the winter. So a unit of water is 750 gallons. So 750 times 5 is, a little under 5,000 gallons of water a month. We're going to allow that to increase up to 500% of that. So that's the tier 2. You're not going to drop into the tier 2 until you use 25 units of water. So I think Steve's jumping on his phone. 25 units of water times 750 gallons. That's a significant amount of water.
18,750 gallons.
Yeah. If you go over that, those next gallons that you use, so like if you go, Pat, from 18,000 gallons, Teresa, to 19,000, those gallons, instead of being, and James, I don't know if we could hide the Zoom, we can't see the consumption rates, but those units will go from $2.04 to, Andy, can you see that? It's like
$2.75.
$2.75. And then you'll be charged for those additional units, $2.75, until you get to the 750%, and then it'll jump higher to the $3.50 some odd cents. Does that make sense, Teresa?
Yeah, it does.
This is Patricia. I have a question. Can you give us an example of cost, like how much it is and then jumping up? I mean, what would the average jump price be?
Sure. Maybe Josh, we did that for you. Could you share anything with us about that, Josh?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think because we use my yard as an example, that half acre with the big green lawn, and I can't remember, Andy, if you had those numbers with you, but it was a decent increase for like July and August, and that was really where it hit me, and then I went back down. So you're probably a 30% increase in my normal bill, which is hard to do because my bill comes with sewer.
I'd be really careful saying any kind of percentages there because, Josh, you remember you were watering twice a day versus once a day, but at the end of the day, Teresa, or Patricia, it will only affect those high water users. So like if you're in, if you're downtown Valley Floor, if you have, if you live in Polish with a small yard, there's no way this would affect you. Mm-hmm. And it will only affect those bigger amounts. So,
in my yard, I fall into the tier 2 for about 2 to 3 months out of the year. And the difference, the additional cost for the water consumption adds about $14 a month for the higher price that I'm paying rather than if it were just a flat rate, $2.04 a unit.
And that was kind of the worst month that we looked at, August. It's going to be less of an impact in the other months.
So I'm going to pay the same flat rate plus about an additional $14 a month for those few months, and otherwise I'm back into the normal rate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. The tier 1 is what's the maximum number of units on tier 1?
So tier 1, you can use up to, and this is a home, 25 units of water. A unit of water is 750 gallons. And so that was 18,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
Yep.
Which our average residential customer, Teresa, uses 4 times more water during the summer than the winter. But, average is including, those people that use no more water and those people that use significantly more water during the summer.
Yeah, because it looks like I'm over that number from May through October.
As far as how many units you're...
Yeah,
I was
if I
I was
could,
looking at my bill trying to figure out, do what you guys were doing.
yeah, if I could, as far as tier 1, tier 2, at the maximum amount of tier 2, which is 38 units, and let Eric do the math on the 750 gallons, but 38 units is when you peak out in only at the peak month of August, only 6.5% of customers go above that number. But if you were to use up to 38 units of water, your increase on your water bill would be $9.23, which turns out to be 9.6%. So that's you wouldn't see, no customers up to that 38 would not see more than a 10% increase in the months that was happening. And that's only going to happen in the summer months, and likely, you're not going to be at that 38. If you get into tier 2, you're going to be between 25 and 38. So it's going to be somewhere between 0% change and no more than 9.6. You get up into where you're using 80 CCF, and Josh may have been in this situation, while he's out there doing his, greens maintenance and stuff. Is 80 would get you an additional monthly cost of $73, which is a little over a 40%, monthly increase. And again, that would be very few customers that are ultimately in that situation. And part of the design of this rate structure, it's to kind of be somewhat conservation oriented, as well as generate revenue, and fully expect that, some customers would look at this and say, well, it's not worth it. And you're somewhat encouraging the behavior to use less, which means you don't have to build as much infrastructure to support it, and, kind of provides for the ability to add on additional customers without having to spend the big capital investment. So it kind of serves two purposes. It's not to be punitive. It's to really be encouraging the conservation, and as I think, at least the discussion between myself and staff has been how to have a rate structure that isn't penalty oriented, which is that tier 2 is at 500%, when the average is 4 times that, as opposed to 5 times consumption. Does that all make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it does. I have a question on tier 1. What's the highest rate on tier 1 before you hit into tier 2 per bill? Like $100 or so?
No, so it's just the amount of water. So
right.
If you use 1 unit of water, it's going to be $2.04. If you use 25 units of water, each of those units would be $2.04. If you go over that, then that additional water is increased. So I guess
$2.75 instead of $2.
Yeah, it's $69.83 would be your bill at 25 units.
Yeah, and then that doesn't include the other charges, not for water, but for the use of the pipes and everything else?
That would that'd be everything to do with water. You would also have your sewer bill that isn't going to be changed as a result for residential.
And how much is that per month usually?
The sewer, Liz, you got that number? I don't.
$6.52.
Okay, so we're looking at about $100 from tier 1, and then you jump up in tier 2 above that, about 25. So, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so just back to my example, Andy. I do routinely in August and July. I'll hit that 70 unit mark. So that's where I'm getting my increase on my water and how I was calculating that. So I'll actually might even hit that tier 3 briefly and then drop back down. Right.
Yeah. And in 70 units, would see your bill go up $58 or 36%, at a 70 unit type thing. And obviously the more water you use in the tier 3, with that rate being 75% greater than the $2.04 rate, the greater the percentage, ultimately, compared to where you are today, that, that would just continue to creep up. It'd never go above 75%, but.
So how do our rates compare to other areas in Central Oregon? Because I've talked to some people in the past that had just moved here, and they were just flabbergasted by our sewer and water rate.
Flabbergasted in which way?
They told me that they were paying like $25 a month. This was a couple years ago. I ran into somebody that was new, and they found out I was on the council, and I remember the $26 number stuck in my head. They paid $26 a month for sewer, and then their water bill was basically half of what they got when they moved here.
Well, I think our next slide's going to show that. Yeah. So, James, if we could switch. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. On this is something that we've done a lot of work with over the years. I mean, this Cividata is, my company, and we have the individual rates for Lapine and Madras and Redmond, Bend and Sisters, all in this, as well as Prineville. This is showing additional cities in Oregon, and not calling out any other city other than Prineville on the proposed, what these rates are right now, call them proposed. And the blue line here shows single-family residential consumption from 0 CCF up to 100 CCF. And, I can play with this on my computer a little bit so I can see the numbers that you're not able to see underneath the graph. But at at 0 consumption at 1853, the average is $20.42. So Prineville is about 15% below average. And it's basically, as you go up this entire chart all the way out to 100, it fluctuates in that 15 to 18% range below the average of these 29 different municipalities. And I've been around doing this stuff for a long time, and the comment that you heard from your friend or person you ran into is something I hear a lot, but I give it a grain of salt because I've looked at, 1,000 different rates. There's a few that are down here that are the red line, and those are generally systems that have all sorts of issues and are just, a catastrophe away from having rates that are well above the black line.
Okay.
And with that said, every system is different. You have some systems like in Hood River that their water comes out of the mountains, out of springs, so they have no
gravity. Yep.
They have no energy to pump it. We spend over $200,000 a year in electricity pumping our water. Very little treatment, and then you have some communities that have to do a lot of treatment on their water, and it's higher. So it's just different based upon your geology and your location.
And just Teresa, keep in mind that one of the things that's been our strategy, as you know, for a number of years, I'm going to say over a decade, is to really focus on the value proposition of what we do in our utilities. And so while we were in the depths of the last recession, we really positioned our community in terms of water rights, in terms of water capacities, and as Eric demonstrated early in the presentation, on how well we take care of our water by eliminating leaks and effectiveness in our system. And we have predicted and forecasted that Prineville, compared to our contemporaries in Central Oregon, is a very high-value utility. And we can certainly provide that information for you. We've done that in the past, but as times march forward, other communities in our Central Oregon area are having to invest a lot of money just to keep up with growth, and they're very quickly surpassing us and putting distance between our rates and their rates. So Prineville continues to be very competitive when compared amongst the Central Oregon communities.
Yeah, case in point, this is Steve Uffelman. Case in point, a couple of years ago, Madras was considerably lower than we were in cost of utilities, water and sewer, and now they are significantly higher than we are. So it hasn't been very long since that turnaround has taken place.
And you think about it, I always just think about it as like the life cycle of a utility.
Right.
So we were very lucky with the wetland that we didn't have to invest the millions and millions of dollars, but let's say the city of Prineville, we would have had to build that $60 million plant. When you turn that on day one, you may only be using 10% of that plant because you're building it to meet future demand.
Right.
When you're at 98% capacity, you're going to be getting much more value out of that. And so that's where, going back to Andy's statement, maybe you do have a utility that has very low rates, but they're at 98, 99% capacity, and they're going to have to take that next big step that will then, jump rates around. And that's where we're trying to be very conservative and do everything we can to smooth out those big jumps.
And I think another history lesson, and I know we need to be careful with respect to time this evening, but another history lesson that I would remind the council and staff about is Eric's work as it relates to water rights. We have a inventory of water rights, partly because of how Eric has managed the water rights on the Barnes Butte acquisition, which was our strategy, and how we justified that, how we managed the water rights underneath some of the operating entities that down at the wastewater treatment plant, and of course the work the city did with respect to the Crooked River Legislation Act that President Obama signed. And so, to put that example, I'm going to ask Eric to do a quick calculation. We just rehabilitated a well on La Monta and moved it from 200 gallons a minute to 600 to 800 gallons a minute, or thereabouts. If we didn't have water right mitigation credits, that well in and of itself could have cost the city millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
And we have those rights in inventory. We purchased them strategically through acquisition, through legislative purposes or processes rather, and we're in a very good spot. But the reason I bring this up is this isn't something that Eric came up with last week. This is something that Eric and the team here at the city has been working on for over 10 years to put our city in a position of strength, and that's allowing us to be very, very competitive, again, when we compare our rates charged to other cities, as Andy points out with the 29 entities that he's comparing us to in this particular graph that he has on the screen right now.
And that's a fine line. I think that's one way in which we're lucky is that you have staff with some pretty deep ties here.
Yeah.
Steve and I were both born here. We're both going to die here. The value of that legislation that we went through in those water rights, that's like $35 million right there. We've done some other work with water rights, and tomorrow, if the city decided, we could sell water rights to our neighboring communities and come up with $10 million. But is that a good thing to do, and then just later on be in a pinch for those water rights? Once again, we're trying to do everything we can to smooth out those big jumps. With that said, we have to be careful. We don't want our existing customers paying the way for customers 20 years from now.
Right.
But we're just trying to be very thoughtful as to how we grow and make that growth very equitable.
Strategic.
Yeah.
So anyway, a little history lesson or a reminder for those of you who have heard that strategy previously.
So
Hey,
I have
Eric.
a question. This is Patricia.
Sorry.
On the usage, I believe it was 11 to 1 industrial. They use a whole lot more in the summertime. Are they too going to be held at these rates?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to continue to do this just as we do with SDCs. Everybody pays the same rates,
Mm-hmm.
and so they would pay accordingly. once again, Patricia, if we chose not to do this and we just stayed with the one set rate, then we would have to increase that at a portion that would really negatively impact our residential customers that don't use much water. They would be subsidizing these customers that are trying to irrigate an acre yard or are trying to cool $1 billion worth of servers and things like that.
So have you guys done a fiscal impact study on what the end result's going to be after all the increases on, like, say, last year, if they would have had the rates in, to see how much more revenue you'll be producing with the tier rates?
Go ahead, Andy, you got that one?
Yes, yeah, we've got a model that shows, what the forecast revenue would be with these rates in place. And, it's the one thing we haven't done, it gets to be a lot of judgment involved in terms of what will happen economically with respect to people's decisions, when the rates, do go up. Will they, how much less will they ultimately consume? And so, we do anticipate there will be some reduction in some change in behavior. But, the number that has been targeted as we've gone through this, as we evaluate fiscal year 18-19, using it as the benchmark, was to have revenue come in under the modeling to be about a little over 2% greater than it was targeted to be. So expecting some reduction in consumption. That's where it is right now.
Do you have like an estimate number?
Pardon?
2% equates to how much in revenue? Dollars?
It's about 54,000.
Okay.
And it, so we generate approximately, and it, that doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it's important to realize that the water fund is a utility. And being a utility, there's restrictions associated with it. So, Patricia, we can't increase our water fund to hire another police officer. You just fundamentally can't do that. You've got to keep those dollars within that fund. Yeah. And,
I wasn't suggesting that. I just was curious to see, after all of this, what the total revenue would be and if it would offset the loss in your bulk water.
Yeah, and that's what we used that model for, Patricia, when we played around with the 500% and the 750% and then those different tiers. We used the model to essentially make it break even.
Okay, that's thank you.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yes, sir.
Eric, quick question for you. Instead of thinking about Josh and his gorgeous lawn and, thinking about Mr. before he dies and he gets his little house in town and he happens to get into a neighborhood that has a homeowners association and they basically set how much he has to water, is what's the realistic chance that somebody, because I guess I'm thinking about somebody that might be on a fixed income, but that is that situation. Is there any realistic chance, there always is, but what's the chance that a person in town lot, or up here in Polish or wherever, that would really, what would it take to get them into tier 2, or would they ever get there?
We looked at Polish, and those lots don't go into tier 2, they stay in tier 1.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Jeff, where people pay for their consumption, it's your choice. You can have a $20, I'm not sure what the least amount, there's some people that use very, very little water, but you could have a $22 water bill or you could have a $200 water bill. It's completely up to you. With the residential customers, it's going to be all about not having a huge green lawn. And so to get back to your question, if you're a senior on a very limited income, I doubt if there's many of those people that choose to have a half-acre green lawn in the high desert. It's probably going to be you know, they're not gonna do that. And if we look at, you know, I find it interesting in the Yellow Pine area, if you look at the historic satellite images, you know, when all of those half-acre lots went in, it was all green grass, and then it's shrinking and shrinking. You know, people are deciding that maybe they don't want to pay for that. You know, they can go to a park that's irrigated with surface water.
Environmental awareness.
Yeah.
There's lots of, you know, one of the things that Eric and I have discussed, and all of us have discussed, I shouldn't just say Eric and I, but this is a little bit counterintuitive, you know, where, you know, we tend to think in terms of volume discounts, you know, so we can spread those fixed costs, and the more we sell, the cheaper it's going to be. That's not really true in the scenario we're in, and
it would be if we sold the same amount every month.
Yeah, exactly. But with the situation we have, to Eric's point, because we have these 11-to-1 variations, is we're not able to utilize and spread those costs for a very long amount of time. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's also in alignment to, you know, promote conservation and incentivize good stewardship, which is another pillar of our strategy with this valuable resource here in the high desert, which is water. So there's some environmental responsible aspects to this methodology that we want to deploy. We don't want to harm anybody, but we also want to recognize there's a cost associated with these variations being so great from one season to another.
Yeah, there's a lot of our customers on the valley floor that may have a huge green lawn, but they are using a shallow irrigation well.
Right.
You know, that's great. We're providing their domestic water that doesn't go up or down, and they have a shallow well that they can use legally to do that. There's a lot of customers that do that, but you know, if you're taking potable water and pouring tens of thousands of gallons on it or on the ground to keep down dust during the summer, you know, that might not be the best use of that water.
Yeah.
Or just pay accordingly.
So can someone get a permit for a shallow irrigation well?
Oh, absolutely, and a lot of them, you know, there's no water rights required. A lot of these are what we call Patricia sand points, so people just drive a pipe in the ground, you know, the water's down there 8 feet, and they irrigate their yards with it.
By Oregon water law, you can, every property can irrigate or drill a well and irrigate 1/2 acre. That's the property.
Acre? I knew
1/2 acre.
I know legally it's not supposed to be more than 7,500 gallons a day.
Well, it's according to Oregon law, it's a water right. It's 1/2 acre. So if you've got a 1/2 acre or less, and you are in the lower part of town where water is fairly close to the surface, you can put in a sand point and go down about 12 to 14 feet, tap into water and put a surface pump in and irrigate your yard and have flat water rates for potable water.
Yep, and please don't drink that water though. It's not it's not protected and it's not good quality, but it's wonderful for irrigation.
But, yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I know that I've just this last few weeks removed almost 150 square feet of yard and eliminated a couple of sprinklers, so my water consumption will go down.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Eric. I'm not going to spend as much this year.
No. So I think, Andy, we're ready to move that next slide. That answers some questions that are being asked as well, I think.
Yeah, just, you know, kind of put a bow around, you know, that, you know, the point in terms of the number of customers that are ultimately impacted. You know, again, the highest month is August, and 36% of the customers would slip into Tier 2, and less than 7% would go above into Tier 3. And if you were to look at the 6 months that this would be in effect, the average is, for those 6 months in terms of number of customers that get impacted, is less than 20%. So, you know, 80% overall end up, you know, not really, you know, 80% of the time do not have an impact due to this rate structure change. And then if you're looking at Tier 3, it averages less than 3% in term, or 3.5%, 4% of the number of customers that ultimately get impacted by this rate structure. So you're talking the folks that are using considerable amounts of water, well above the averages. Okay. With that, on the next slide here, there's approximately 35% of the cities that are utilizing tiered rate structures in the state of Oregon. It's a policy that is encouraged by the Oregon Water Resources Department to promote conservation. We are seeing a trend in the increased usage of this of a tiered rate structure. When I first started in this 30 whatever years ago, no one was really using tiered rates at all in the state of Oregon. La Pine is the only other city in Central Oregon using tiered rates. They went through a process here several years ago when they were going through the incorporation model, with a lot of state dollars, and those state dollars also helping fund water systems, sewer systems, and so forth. They ended up with a tiered structure. I know Bend has been talking about tiered rates for several years. The other communities, not as much. But, with that, be glad to address any other questions you may have.
I think what we'd like to propose, and Eric helped me out here, but I think what we'd like to propose as staff is, we've got a couple more council meetings between now and the end of June. So we would like to come back to staff with come back to council with a staff report outlining a proposed action that would need your approval for us to move forward with in a rate adjustment scenario by the end of this fiscal year. Eric?
Yeah, we would, every year at the last meeting in June, we adopt our rate schedule for the coming year. Just trying to get this out in front of you so you could ask any questions, and I think, like right now, I'm feeling like we'll continue to move forward with this and analyzing it. But at the end of the day, probably that last meeting in June, we would take a little time to dive down deep into it.
Yeah,
we missed a couple of council members. I've sent this information to Janet. I can catch up with Jason, and I'm sure questions will come up, and each and every one of you will want us to run the model for your account so we can tell you the impact of it.
And we do have a council meeting obviously coming up next week, and we have two in June. But if you have some analysis work that Eric and I and the staff could do to help you better be prepared to make the decision by the last meeting in June for a tiered rate program, we'd be happy to accommodate that. But don't be bashful in the next few meetings if you want to bring something up, or if you would like us to take a few minutes during the next council meetings to answer any questions or provide any analysis work.
And at the end of the day, the staff is here to get down into the weeds. We appreciate the council being our policy. You guys are looking out 5 years, 10 years. What I really wanted to communicate to you is to explain a very complicated topic, but essentially I hope you've understood that if we just raise rates across the table, then we have certain customer classes in supporting other customer classes. We feel like the tiered rate system is more equitable. And then, is that the policy we want to go? Yes, no, and then we can talk about the details.
Yep.
And also the fact that it is those customers that are the outliers that are causing the additional cost of the operation. And so we're having it's a user pay scenario. So that's the best thing we can put forward for our community to make it equitable for everyone. So, any further questions on this issue, or should we move to the next? Okay.
All right, well, I can jump into this topic to give us a little background on the franchise fees, and then I want to, at the end of it, kind of turn it over to Steve to work through a conversation with council and somewhat of a brainstorming session. So, James, could we bring up the next PowerPoint, please? So what we'd like to talk about are our franchise fees. So franchise fees are fees that the city charges a utility to utilize our right-of-way. So Pacific Power, they have all of their poles, all of their lines in our right-of-way, and so we currently charge them 5%. So 5% of every bill comes to the city. Those fees are very much used to support the general fund, so a lot of our streets, get paved with those dollars. Our public safety gets used with that. Prior to the data centers coming to town, the city of Prineville, with our 10,000 people, with the mills we still have with Les Schwab, we used about 10 megawatts of power. That has significantly increased over the last decade, and this graph really shows that. So these are franchise fees. So 2008, 2009, 2010, we would generate about $300,000 a year. That's from the customers here in Prineville, our residential, our mills, those things.
Specific to the city limits, right?
Yep, specific to the city limits. 2011, the data centers started turning on their servers and started consuming significantly more power. So you can see in 2019, that topped out at, I believe it was $2.8 million in franchise fees. That has been wonderful for the community. That's allowed us to do some great things. We put money into our police department, into our streets, and it's really just worked out very, very well for us. So moving forward to the next slide. So this is a graph that shows what other communities charge as far as a franchise fee. So one city we were able to find, Molalla, charges 3.5%. There's John Day, Cottage Grove, Portland, and us are currently charging 5%. And then what we're seeing with tough budgets is other cities. So we got Sisters, Bend, Redmond, and Madras are all charging 7% of the franchise fee. So what this means is that currently 5% of your power bill comes to the city. We're talking about the potential to increase that to 6 or 7 or to leave it alone. So next slide, James. This is the really, really good news as to where the city's going. Right now, or previously we showed the increase in franchise fees as related to the data center growth. Right now we have about 1.8 million square feet of populated space. We're expecting there to be an additional 3.2 million square feet of data center space, potentially more than that. But with that said, and with the construction that's currently underway and what we expect to continue, this could increase to $6.4 million a year. Currently, our property taxes deliver us $2 million a year. And so you can see how impactful this is for our community. These are dollars that come right into the general fund, so they're not restricted. We can use these dollars to match grants, to do whatever needs to be done. Next slide, please. So right now, current franchise fee is 5%. As I mentioned, we're at currently in 2019, we received $2.7 million. So if we were to increase that to 6%, that would be an annual increase in revenue of $550,000. If we went to 7%, that would be over $1 million of increased revenue. So next slide, please. So for that average residential electric bill, if you're paying currently $100 a month for power, these would be the people in town that have natural gas. An increase to 6% would be an additional $1 per month. If we went to 7%, that would be $2 per month. Once again, before the data centers came, we were receiving $300,000 a year. Now we're close to $3 million. So at the end of the day, the big power users are going to generate this additional revenue. Any questions of that? And so that's what we wanted to talk about and to tell you about this potential opportunity. And with that, Steve, do you want to kind of take over and talk about things we could do?
So as you all know, Eric and I work extremely close with a gentleman by the name of Matt Chancellor. We have very close relationships with some of the hierarchy at PacifiCorp. Matt Chancellor is our community liaison with PacifiCorp. And, we had some hesitation when this contract came up. We knew it was coming up here at this June. We actually have to get it done by the end of June or from about mid-July, I guess. But, we had some trepidation. We didn't want to take advantage. We've been given a tremendous opportunity. We worked to get it, but this has been a tremendous gift. Eric mentioned we support the streets. We're building a multi-million-dollar police facility for Dale and his team without going out for bond. That's unheard of. We have worked very hard to minimize and mitigate our PERS unfunded liability, all as a result of these electrical franchise fees coming to our city. So, and obviously the strength of our financial position in terms of our contingencies and our ending fund balances, again, can be traced back to the electrical franchise fees being what they are. But having said that, when we really tried to get outside the box and think this through strategically, we have some issues. We have some uncertainty with the COVID-19, knowing that we're going to see some revenue degradation in some of our shared revenues. Gas tax or transient lodging tax could be at risk. So we're going to see some, obviously, economic impacts that will result in some reduction in some of the funding streams the city deploys and allocates. So with that being said, what we discussed, Liz and Eric and I said, well, what happens if we would take a run at going up only 1% to 6%? Eric had, the previous slide had that illustration. And that way we would kind of keep a strategic, again, foundational or pillar that we're always providing more value than our contemporaries, especially here in Central Oregon. So we would still be the lowest cost alternative on franchise fees when compared to other cities in our region. And could we take a significant, meaningful portion of that incremental growth? As Eric mentioned, we expect that to be around $550,000, $600,000, and do some really good things for the community. And we need to retain some of that because, again, we have some debt service increases as it relates to the police station. Those we went out, as you know, and refunded that original funding, added to it a little bit, so our debt service has come up some, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. Eric's been working hard on the ASR project. We expect to have some additional costs that we'll need to manage our way through as we move toward completion of that. And again, we have some uncertainty in some of our traditional revenue streams. So we want to keep a portion of that incremental growth going to the general fund to allow some flexibility. But at the same time, especially with the uncertainty as it relates to our economy and what we've experienced or are experiencing and anticipate experiencing with the COVID-19 epidemic and pandemic, is things like the senior low-income discount. Very few people take advantage of that. Obviously, we've had quite a bit of people take advantage of some of the moves we've made to try to mitigate interruptions in our citizens' regular forms of income by allowing them, no shut-offs and allowing them some grace time to get relief from those bills. We have the police department debt service that I mentioned. We have some utility infrastructure that I mentioned, ASR, but there's some others as well. And then we have some opportunities that we think are really important to be able to invest in, like the Combs Flat extension, getting some of those projects Eric and I kind of use a new term as it relates to another project we're working on, investment grade ready. So shovel ready is another term that we've used in the past. So if we could, and that takes money to have engineers and folks that Eric worked with to get us ready so that if we do get some stimulus funds, some recovery funds, some COVID-19 economy incentive funds, that we have some projects ready to go. And of course, we have the swimming pool that, Liz and all of us here at the city's been really working hard to see if there's a way we can assist our friends at Parks and Rec, or is there a role that the city just needs to take in the form of a leadership position to help make that be a reality for our community? Certainly very much needed. And then obviously strengthen our financial position. Liz, as she reported at the last council meeting, we were able to go out and extend our refunding at 1.7%. That's a direct correlation between the strength of the financial condition of the city of Prineville. So I think what we'd like to propose tonight to the council is moving forward with an adjustment to our contract franchise agreement with Pacific Core that keeps the city very competitive, more competitive than our contemporaries here in Central Oregon and throughout Oregon, and then come back to the council if we were to get council approval to go to a higher rate other than 5%. I'm thinking 6%. I think staff would agree. And then if council would approve us to make that change, then work with council and staff to come up with an allocation strategy on what would we like to fund. How much of the incremental growth would we want to dedicate to some of the things that we're showing potentially here under the opportunity bullets on the screen right now. So that's our logic. Eric, Mayor, anything more to add to that?
Well, there are a combination of things that I would like to raise, one of which is when we start not knowing what the life cycle of the data center business is. We had initially said we're going to take all of the franchise fees and set them aside and hold them to use those for capital improvements for the community. The police department and some other needs came up that have bumped our costs higher than we had anticipated, and so we have dipped into those franchise fees for that. I don't want to get into a slippery slope with franchise fees and doing some things, but I want to keep that a bit of the mindset. The other concern that I have when we talk about added expenses is this COVID-19 issue is going to wreak havoc with PERS funding, and every city in the state and every government, including all the schools, the schools and counties, etc., that deal with PERS are going to have to pay greater amounts in to offset the losses that PERS is going to experience or is experiencing with this COVID-19 situation. So those are some concerns that I have moving forward, but I think that it's well and appropriate to consider that additional percentage.
The comment I would make is, like, right, wrong, or indifferent, about 90% of this increase would be picked up by customers that are currently getting a nice property tax abatement. Take that for whatever that statement's worth. The other thing I would say is currently this would generate approximately $550,000 a year. I can't even come close to doing those projects for $550,000 a year. So I want to make sure that people aren't thinking this is going to allow us to go build a pool and build the Cones Flat extension. Absolutely not, But we expect the franchise fees to continue to grow, so proportionately this would grow. As far as being city engineer, these dollars are wonderful because there's no restriction to them. So if we look at the roundabout, that was approximately a $5 million project. We came up with $1 million and we got $4 million from the state. I would love to do a similar project like that with the Cones Flat extension, but potentially a part of these dollars could go to that. But just to realize this is $500,000 on a $50 million budget, let's not expect everything to happen in the next year or two.
Good point.
This is Teresa. I guess I have a couple of concerns. We just saw, as you know, looking at it as a homeowner or a resident, and with this COVID thing that's just tearing a lot of people's finances apart, we just took an increase on garbage. We're now going into a tiered water system to where we can't go anywhere, so we want to stay home and have a nice yard, and so that's going to cost us more money. And now we're looking at a raise in our electric bill. So I guess my concern is we have had a huge increase due to the data centers. My concern is I would like to see the residents kind of reap those rewards for a little bit and still get the benefits of that money and still not pay a higher electric bill.
Yeah, and Teresa, that's very similar to our I can speak only for myself, but my first reaction was exactly what you're describing. I've come around a little bit to be able to open up and look at the potential of something that may be still competitive. But to your point, I think that's you make a very, very good point. And the other thing I would say to the council is, if we elected to leave it the same, over the concerns such as you're describing, Teresa, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have another opportunity to make an adjustment in the future. So
is that every 5 years?
Yes, you're going in the same direction. So typically that's been a 5-year agreement. But I did speak to Matt, and what we could do is say, hey, for the next year, we're just going to leave it the same. Just extend the existing one, the 5% one, for a year or another year or something of that nature, and then revisit this next year or the year after. That was another option that I kind of liked because of what you're describing, Teresa. We don't have to do anything right now. But I do think that there is some merit, as Eric stated, in being able to have some extra dollars to leverage on some of these projects that, you know, we may not be able to get our arms around because of some of the things that Mayor Uffelman spoke to regarding uncertainty in our economy right now. So I just want to keep in mind, just because we're uneasy right now and we might make a decision to not change, doesn't mean that we couldn't revisit it in a much shorter time frame than 5 years.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, $20 to some people right now, especially, $20 to some people all the time. I mean, you know, you start getting these increases and the cost of food goes up, and you know, it's the evolutionary cycle of inflation. You know, I just, with the benefit that we have gotten from Facebook and the data centers and the huge increase we've gotten, you know, I tend to think I would like to see the citizens kind of get a reprieve on that for a little bit. We're going to start getting property taxes in on that here eventually too, so that money's going to be coming down the pike.
Yeah, that makes sense, Teresa. So I think again, this is a opportunity that I think we need to understand. And I hope that the presentation that Eric and I put together tonight is helpful. I think staff will, I don't think we will come back to council here in the next couple meetings and ask for an up or down vote on, to Eric's point, as he illustrated in the beginning, do we leave it the same or do we adjust it? And we can certainly do that here in the next few weeks. But I think, you know, Teresa, you make a good point, and I think that needs to be weighed very heavily.
And definitely, you know, Teresa, please don't think we're advocating one way or another. We're just explaining the opportunity.
Exactly.
And, you know, the pluses and minuses, because very much I agree. When I first started thinking about this, Teresa, I was exactly where you're at. But then, you know, you think about the opportunity and the fact that 90% of it is being picked up by a group that's getting tax breaks right now. It made me start thinking about it. So
Yep.
And if there was a way to, you know, separate that out maybe or something, you know, like the water bill situation, you know, I know like the windmill farms over in the Condon and Arlington area, they came in, they pay a tax, and none of the citizens there, they don't even pay property taxes because the windmills basically pick that up.
Yep.
So, you know, I just, that's my concern is, you know, yeah, the city also is dealing with this COVID thing, and long term, those projects would be great, but, you know, like I said, maybe it's just not a right now thing, like you guys are talking.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and remember too that there were years back that no one in the city of Prineville paid property taxes because it was all on the shoulders of the railroad.
Yep.
So, you know, there is also a life cycle with all of those systems, and eventually it comes back to reality. But I'm looking at, I mean, I know personally my electric bill at home runs about $85 a month, and so I'd be paying about 80 cents a month addition to my on my electricity bill if this were to move forward. So it's not to the typical customer, it's not going to be any significant amount. Yes, it's an increase, and I do appreciate that, Teresa, but one of those things just to take into consideration. How much is...
One thing that I'm thinking about, too, as far as monthly electric bills is not everyone... My average electric bill, because I have 3 people, one of which is a child that loves to take hot showers, is about $130 a month. But you get some of these homes with baseboard heat and things like that don't have energy efficient heat. Maybe it's a rental or something like that, or a low income mobile home, and their electric bills can often run up at anywhere between $300 and $500.
Yes,
good point.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Other council members, any questions, comments, thoughts?
Mayor, this is Jeff. I hear what you're saying, Teresa, and I really respect it. I'm torn because it's when is this opportunity window going to open again? We didn't ask for it to open up. It did. Now we come to a fork in the road. What do we do? I guess what would help me and might help the rest of the council is when you do come back looking for some type of a decision, is give us some real numbers. You know, what's an average person, what's an average household or something, or how does that break down? That might help us where we can really see what would be the actual effect of it.
Yeah, and Jeff, you know, it's real easy for us to do that. We can get with Matt and get an average for the community or something of that nature.
But really, to boil it down, it's hard to get those averages.
It's a penny a dollar. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So if your electric bill is $100, it would cost you $1 more a month.
Yeah.
If it's $300, it would be $3 a month. If it's $500, it would be $5 a month. You know, and so that's really what it is.
Yeah, and Jeff, to your other point, you know, we can certainly we'll put some of that information together. You know, for our council meeting when we bring this back up. But to your other point, you know, one thing we could do, and I'll just revisit it real quickly, is the existing contract, and we've done a couple of them since I've been here, is a 5-year deal. There is nothing preventing us from saying we want a 1-year deal. You know, so that's a significant change that we could say we're going to stay with 5%, we're going to revisit it in 1 year. We could still stay for 5% in 1 year, but we could make an adjustment at that time should we so choose. So we've got a significant amount of flexibility in terms of timing, you know, maybe waiting and see what happens with the economy, certainly having sensitivity to Teresa's comments and concerns. All those things can be incorporated, but if we're not comfortable, my recommendation, and I think staff would support this, is, you know, let's shorten up that timeline on the contract so that we can revisit it sooner than 5 years.
I have a suggestion. This is Patricia. and I don't know the feasibility of this, but could you create a foundation for a fund that you could actually use for winterization of homes for some of the lower income? I mean, if you're going to be receiving $500-some thousand a year, maybe you set aside say $40,000 and help some of the lower income people. So those $300 a month, you know, if you winterize and help some of those folks, it would be less money than $3 a month, and everybody, it would be a win-win situation.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly the type of opportunities I was hoping, you know, that the council would be interested in having a discussion about.
And I would even like to take that one step further, because Neighbor Impact and some of the other programs, you know, it's all for low income. Middle income gets left out of these things. And so the middle income often has difficulties paying their electric bill and child care costs and all of these other costs because they're over income for the low income help, and they're not enough income to just cover the costs. So, you know, even if that type of program would be created, I would love to see that brought into, you know, cover maybe help out the middle income a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's a possibility. And I think, you know, we probably didn't expand on that bullet point, but that was really the staff's logic and kind of how I think Eric and I and Liz kind of came around to moving from we shouldn't change anything to maybe moving it up a point, going from 5 to 6, is to be able to offset exactly what you're describing, Teresa, and Patricia, in that a significant, meaningful amount of money being targeted to assist, people that could use a helping hand, or whether you're low income or you lost your job, or middle income, some kind of again, maybe we could look at a tiered system that, in other words, self-funded that. So the people that need relief, we're getting it, and the people that, you know, $1 more a month or 80 cents more a month is you know, not unmanageable. So to answer your question, absolutely, I think those are the type of things that we want to determine. And one of the things that's interesting about what we're doing here, we don't have to decide by the end of June, you know, what that would be. What we do need to decide here in the next month or so is, are we changing that, or are we adjusting the term of the contract? If we were, for example, to decide, yes, we're going to increase from 5 to 6, for example, and we institute that and we update the contract accordingly, we can then take, you know, a good amount of time and form a committee, or however the council would like to proceed, to determine the left and right limits of a program like you're describing, both Patricia and Teresa. So that's kind of the beauty of the flexibility that we have right now as it relates to this potential opportunity.
Janet is not able to be with us tonight, but that was exactly the question that she raised with me today when I talked to her about adding the 1% to bump it up to 6%. She asked, is there a possibility of taking a segment of those funds for exactly what you're talking about doing? So I think that there's a very realistic probability that we could set up a committee to address how to move forward with that concept.
Yeah. So I think, council, what I envision happening at the council meeting regarding this situation with our franchise fees is probably give you a little bit of a list of options. You know, one obviously is we do nothing, change the term of the contract, or change the contract percentage. So I would anticipate having some discussions, and again, if you could give staff some direction on, you know, any analytical things you would like to see that would help you be able to come to a decision, we're certainly here to serve and make sure that happens.
Gail, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have any comments on this?
I do. I was like Teresa in the beginning, having mixed feelings with everything that's going on. I would be concerned about hitting people both with the tier system and Pacific Power at the same time. I do like the thought that we could help somebody, and to me, it's not just necessarily somebody low income. There might be a family who's lost their job. They might be going through cancer treatments and just hard up on their luck. And I do think that it's a real good possibility of maybe extending out a year for the franchise fees too. So there's a lot of options to consider.
I know that Pacific Power has had programs for energy efficiency for homes, and that might be something that we could capitalize on and tag onto putting into the system as well.
Well, you know, and I think Teresa brought up a very interesting point, and I was kind of looking for Josh to chime in here, but Teresa, you mentioned, you know, the Housing Works, and is that what you mentioned? But the organization that you participate in, Neighbor Impact, excuse me. You know, we could certainly, you know, we've got a few dollars that we were able to put toward some improvement projects for people to energy efficient opportunities for their homes. We could certainly participate in some, or allocate some of the incremental growth in these funds to bolster and improve and increase those type of programs. So that's something to keep in mind.
Steve, if you want me to chime in real quick, we currently use the Neighbor Impact Weatherization Program for low income, and that's what we do with our air quality program. DEQ funnels money through us, and we funnel it to them. They would absolutely be up for increasing that funding. They may even be able to set their thresholds different. I don't know if they can change it and raise their rates, but the other opportunity might be with the Energy Trust. I'm not sure how they work, but the Energy Trust of Oregon does a lot of those programs as well, and that's for everyone.
I don't think that we would struggle to find good things to do with this.
Yeah.
But with that said, you know, it's a new topic. I was exactly where you guys were at the beginning, so we just wanted to bring up the opportunity, and then we can chat about it at the coming council meetings. And like I say, we can always extend it out if we don't want to make a decision soon.
Well, I know I was adamantly opposed when I first heard the concept.
We all were. Yeah, we absolutely. It's very interesting to me to listen to the council tonight, because you reacted just exactly like staff did, and the mayor happened to be in on that meeting.
Did any of you throw a pencil at me? Because that's what the mayor did.
So, anyway,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you know, it's you know, personally right now, it's with this COVID stuff, you know, I'm struggling, but it seems like that, you know, a lot of people are struggling, and I have a hard time adding anything to that right now. It's more of what's going on.
No, I
hear you.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, it's just you know, even if it's $1, it's still something, and that's
a dollar here, a dollar there, and pretty soon it adds up. So.
Yeah, you're dollared out, and that's why I brought up, you know, the garbage increase and the water, and you know, there's been several increases across the board just in the last 6 months to several of my bills that I.
Right, and you brought up the other biggie, Teresa, and that's the food issue. You know, the cost of groceries. You know, there's some real troubled areas there. So.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Like monthly costs are getting higher and incomes are dropping, and it's you know, unfortunately this whole virus thing is screwing up everything in the middle. But I don't want to see, you know, 2008 was unbelievable, and I just don't want to start putting people in that situation if we can avoid it for $1.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, we'll be on have your thinking caps on, and then we'll revisit this and be aware that staff's going to be asking for some definitive direction here coming up.
Okay.
Anything else for the good of the order for this evening?
Thank you for the presentation. That was very well done.
Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, well, if we have nothing else, then let's close the meeting, and we will reconvene next Tuesday night for a city council meeting.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
I think we have a quick, just a reminder, we have a quick workshop, I believe, from ODOT.
Yep, we'll have the design engineer of the ODOT 3rd Street project virtually in the virtual meeting, and he'll be talking about the ADA limitations and the potential bulb outs. So that should be a good conversation, and hopefully he can answer any questions you guys may have.
5:30 start time, Eric, I believe.
5:15 start time.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make sure Lisa, I'm sure she's still on, will send out a friendly reminder like she always does.
Okay.
Very good.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Mm.